All right, so I'm going to get a preview of this test. Get my pen working up here. So again, this is from a test bank, and so some of the questions will be similar, but not all of them. All right, so let's look at this first question. This is one on linear regression, because it says you can assume the relationship between D and P is linear and use a graphing utility to find the regression line. Okay, so price is in our first row here, so our X values are going to be the price. Our Y values are going to be D, which means demand. And so I'm going to put my first row in list 1 and my second row in list 2. Get my calculator out. I'm going to press stat. I'm going to scroll down and clear out my lists, list 1 and list 2. So second 1, comma, second 2. Then I'm going to put stat and then enter. And so on list 1, I'm going to put my first row, my X values. And then in my second list, I'm going to put my Y. You got to be really careful here because they have decimals. Especially me, I'm trying to do this with a mouse. So I'm going to go back and double check. You just get one of those wrong, even in a decimal place, and everything will be, your answer will be wrong. Okay, now let me check these. All right, that's looking good. All right, so they're looking good, so I'm going to press stat. I'm going to go over to calc, and I'm going to scroll down to linear regression. And I'm going to be doing it with list 1, second 1, comma, second 2, list 2, my X and my Y values. All right, now, here's the thing. We take our linear regression to 4 decimal places, always. Just because the answers are given to 1 decimal place, we're going to be rounding to 1 decimal place at the end. If you round to 1 decimal place now with your formula, you are introducing rounding error and your answer won't be correct. So for this Y equals AX plus B, I'm going to take A and B to 4 decimal places. So Y is equal to 4276 negative 1.4276 times X plus B, which is going to be 57.4943 when I round that to 4 places. Okay, so that's a negative 1. It doesn't look like it. 1. Let me rewrite that. Now, the question here is find the expected demand, find D, and D is Y. So we want to find out what Y is when the price is 15.4 and the price is our X value. And so what we do is you take your equation of your line, your linear regression equation, and you plug in X equals 15.4 into that equation. And then you round to 1 decimal place. Okay, so I'm going to do that now. So I have, and use the negative sign, not the subtraction sign, negative 1.4276 times 15.4, then plus 57.4943. Okay, and just double check I made, I did not. I've clicked the wrong button. So that should be a 9. 49, 57.4943. And let me clear that because I've made a mistake there. Again, it's with the mouse. So negative 1.4276 times 15.4 plus 57.4943. Okay, that's looking better. Now I'm going to take that to 1 decimal place because all of my answers are in 1 decimal place, and we can see here if I take that to 1 decimal place, then that 0 is not affecting anything, so my answer is going to be 35.5. Okay. So I'm not going to type in 35.5 there. It says fill in the blank with the letter that we selected. It was a multiple choice, so I'm going to type in D. Okay. All right, so let's move along. Okay, so let's write this one down in bigger so it's easier to see. So when I'm solving these, where there's only one symbol involved, I want to get the x terms on the left by itself and everything else on the right-hand side. So I'm going to subtract 6x from both sides. That's an x there. And so these will cancel. And 7x minus 6x is 1x, but I'm just going to write that as x. And so my next move is to subtract 6 from both sides. So I can get the x by itself. And so 13 minus 6 is 7. And so my answer is x is greater than or equal to 7, which is a correct answer, but it's not in the form of the selections. So if I was going to draw x is greater than or equal to 7 on the number line, I would start at and include 7, and then everything to the right. So the arrow's pointing to the right, and so that's what we're going to get. And if I was writing that in interval form, read the number line from left to right. I'm starting at and I'm including 7, so I have a square bracket there. And then there's no limit here on the right. And so we can see that's going to be our selection there. Okay. All right, moving on. Let's see what we've got with this one. Then we have less than or equal to that. Okay, what I'm going to have to do first is I have to get rid of these parentheses. So I'm going to distribute that 4 first before I do anything else. So the left-hand side for the moment is unchanged. So this is going to be negative 4 times 4x, so minus 16x. And then negative 4 times 1, so minus 4. Now, the strategy is the same as the previous problem. Get everything with x in it on the left-hand side, and then get eventually x by itself on the left-hand side. And that will give us our answer when we only have one symbol that we're dealing with. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is to add 16x to both sides. So these will cancel. Negative 20x plus 16x is negative 4x. And the goal is to get x by itself on the left-hand side, so I'm going to subtract 24 now from both sides. And so these will cancel, and I'm going to have negative 4x is less than or equal to negative 28. Now what I'm going to do to get x by itself is to divide both sides by negative 4. However, when you divide both sides by the same negative number, the arrow flips. So if I'm going to divide both sides by a negative, then the arrow flips. So what I have on the next line is, well, the negative 4's cancel, and I have x is greater than or equal to, and negative 28 divided by negative 4 is positive 7. The negative signs cancel there. So that's my answer. But again, if I want to see it in the form that they have in the selections, you can draw it on the number line. I start at and include 7, and then I will go on forever to the right. That's the number line presentation. Or if I write it in interval form, reading the number line from left to right, I start at and include 7, and there's no right limit. Okay, so that's looking like the one that we want. Okay. All right. Okay, moving on. All right, let's see what we've got for this one. Okay. Again, you have to get rid of these parentheses. You have to distribute first before you can do any other kind of strategy. So I'm going to distribute the negative 2 through. So negative 2 times x is negative 2x. And then negative 2 times negative 5 is plus 10. And 2 times x is 2x. And 2 times 4 is 8. Now, the strategy is going to be, we only have one symbol to work with here, so try and get x by itself on the left-hand side. I can clean that up. 3x minus 2x is 1x, which I'm just going to write as x. And so now I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides because I want to get the x terms on the left-hand side. That's the goal I always. X minus 2x is negative 1x, or just negative x. And then I'm going to subtract 10 from both sides. So that's going to give me negative x is less than 8 minus 10 is negative 2. Now I need x by itself on the left-hand side. I do not have that. So the way I'm going to get x by itself on the left-hand side is divide both sides by negative 1. But when you divide or multiply by a negative number, you could multiply both sides by negative 1. That'd be the same thing. The arrow flips. And so what we have next is the negative signs cancel. And the negative signs cancel here. And this is my answer. Now this is a correct answer, but we need it in interval form. So what would it look like on the number line? Well, I would start at 2, but we do not include it because of the symbol. And then we want everything to the right. And so once I have the number line drawn, if you read the number line off from left to right, I'm starting at but not including 2, and then it's going off to infinity. Okay, so this is the one that I'm going to want. Okay. All right, so on to the next one. Okay. Well, now we have more than one symbol. So when you have more than one symbol like this, the goal needs to be to get x by itself in the middle. So how am I going to get x by itself in the middle? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is to subtract 3. But what I do to each part, what I do to one part, I must do the same thing to each part. Or This relationship will no longer exist. Okay, so subtracting the same thing is not going to have any effect on the arrow. So I'm going to have 4 is less than or equal to, and so these cancel, 2x is less than or equal to, and 15 minus 3 is 12. And now to get x by itself, I'm going to divide by 2, but I have to do the same thing to each part. Dividing by a positive number does not change anything with regard to the symbols. So I'm going to have 2 is less than or equal to x is less than or equal to 6. Now this is a correct answer, but you notice it's not in this form. So what would this look like on the number line? Well, reading it off from left to right, we'd start at and include 2, and then we would keep going until we got to 6, and because of the symbol, 6 would be included. That's what it would look like on the number line. Now in interval form, read off your number line form from left to right. I start at and include 2, and then I keep going and finish up at 6, and 6 is included. That's what I'm going to want. All right, so it's looking like that one. Okay. And on to this one. All right. Now, when you have negative signs with, when you have 3 different parts, that can be tricky. So let's give ourselves a lot of space here. Okay. Now the goal, when you have 2 symbols like this, and you've got these 3 areas, the goal is to get x by itself in the middle. So the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of that 4. And I'm going to subtract 4 from every part. Now subtracting does not have any effect on that arrow. So on my next line, I'm going to have negative 20. Here, these cancel like they were meant to do. And 12 minus 4 is negative 16. Okay. Now, to get x by itself, I'm going to need to divide by negative 4. And when we divide by negative 4, that's going to flip this entire equation along with the arrows. So, oops, let me do this in a different color. And what we're going to do is think of this like a flip. So, well, let me put these in here. This is where we're going to start. So negative 16 divided by negative 4 is going to give me positive 4. And then what's going to happen is this is going to go here. And so I'm going to have x, and this is positive 5. And so when we flip this, we're going to have this kind of relation. So once we flip that, then these are going to go here. Okay, so it's not that the arrows are being flipped per se. It's that the whole, the entire relation is flipped, like you were taking it and rotating it. Okay, and so I'm going to have, sorry, put that here. 4 is less than x is less than or equal to 5, and so it would look like that, and on the number line, and then I would have this for the interval form. Okay. And so when I look at the possibilities, that's going to be this one here. Okay. So I'm going to mark that one as done. Okay. Now we just want the greatest common factor, the GCF. Okay. All right, well, let's look at the numbers. What is the most that these numbers have in common? And the most they have in common is a 3. All right, now what about the x terms? Well, the most they have in common is x squared. And finally, what about the y terms? The most they have in common is y to the 5th. And that is our GCF, our greatest common factor. So I'm going to type that in there like I'm putting it into WebWork with no spaces. Now that's a correct answer. Now if you had put in the multiplication sign like 3 times x squared times y to the 5th, that is also correct. I had to actually type that into the answers that it will accept. Canvas is so literal. So it will accept either one of those. Okay. All right. All right. Now let's look at factor the polynomial. Okay. Let me do that in black. All right, we have a z here. All right, now if I look at 6, 5, and -6, they don't have anything in common. Their common factor is 1, so I can't factor out something in the front. You always look and see if you can do that first. I cannot. So I'm going to have to use this method. I need a number. Well, I need 2 numbers. So I have to find 2 numbers whose product is 6 times -6. So I want a product of -36, but at the same time, their sum has to be what that middle number is, +5. So we want product is -36 and sum is 5. Well, I know 36 is 9 times 4. So I want -36, but I want them to add up to be 5 at the same time. So +9 times -4 is -36, and +9 plus -4 is +5. So I have found my 2 numbers. My 2 numbers are +9 and -4. So I'm going to rewrite this. I'm going to rewrite that as 6z squared. Oops, let me do that in black. And then instead of 5z, I'm going to do 9z minus 4z because I found my 2 numbers. and then minus 6. I'll do that in black. Okay, make some room. Now I should be able to do this with factoring by grouping. All right, so with this pair, I can factor out a 3, and I can factor out a single power of z. Now what's going to be left in the parentheses? Well, divide each term by 3z. So I would have a 2, and then one of those z's would cancel. The z's would be gone here, and I'd have a 3. Now, what about this pair? Well, this pair, since the leading term is negative, so 4 and 6 have a 2 in common. Since the leading term is negative, factor out a negative 2. And then what am I left with inside? Well, the negative signs cancel. 4 divided by 2 is 2, and I have a z left over. And then the negative signs cancel, and 6 divided by 2 is positive 3. So they have that in common. And then what's going to go in there? Well, 3z and then minus 2. And so this is a correct answer. Now the order doesn't matter. It could have been written with that one first. Either way. And now let's see if I can 2z minus 3. Nope. 4. Nope. 2z plus 3 and 3z minus 2. Okay, I have found it, and as soon as I find it, I'm going to choose that one. Okay. All right, so let's keep moving on. All right, let's do this by grouping, because the 4 factors in and of themselves have nothing in common. All right, if I look at these, I can factor out an x. And what's left? Well, if I divide this by x, I'm left with 2x. And if I divide that by x, I'm left with 7. And with this pair, I can factor out a 7. And what's left? Well, if I divide this by 7, I'll be left with 2x. And if I divide that by 7, I'll be left with 7. So now we can see they have a 2x plus 7 in common. And then what goes in here? I'll have x plus 7. So this is a correct answer. The order doesn't matter. The order could have been the other way around. It's fine. So let's have a look. Can't be that. Can't be any of them with the 2 out the front. Nope. And 2x plus 7 times x plus 7. That's the one. Okay. So once again, let's keep going. Okay. All right, the 4 terms have nothing in common, so let's group the first 2 terms. 36 and 45, their greatest common factor is 9. They also have 1 r in common. So what's going to go in there? Well, if I divide each of those by 9r. So 36 divided by 9 is 4. And then I lose one of those r's. And 45 divided by 9 is going to be 5. And r goes, and I'm left with a y. Okay, now with this pairing, they do have an x in common, but that leading term is negative, so don't factor out an x, factor out a negative x. So what's going to go inside there? Well, divide each term by negative x. So the negative signs will cancel, the x's will cancel, and I'll be left with 4r. And the negative signs will cancel, the x will cancel, and I'll be left with positive 5y. So now you can see what they have in common. And so what's going to be left over? That and that. And the order does not matter. So we could have written it the other way around, which is fine. Either one. Okay, so it can't be that. 9r minus x and 4r plus 5y. I'm just making sure 9r minus x and 4r plus 5y. I have found it, so I'm not even going to look at the other ones. Make sure every term is the same. So, and now we go on to the next one. All right. Well, we actually have a difference of 2 squares. So if we know our squares, 25 is the same thing as 5 squared. And 169 is 13 squared. And so I can rewrite this as 5k all squared, because when it's a product and in parentheses, then this applies to each individual thing inside. Now, it's not the case if you had 5 plus k, but it is the case if you had 5 times k. So here's the trick in this one. Now, the other trick is remembering the formula for a difference of squares. And not to get your powers mixed up. So only what's inside the parentheses is going to be used. And so now it's going to be the red A, which is 5k, not 5k squared. I'm using this formula, plus the red B, which is only 13m. So these squares out the side get left behind when we do this formula. All right, so that will be my answer, and that is matching this one here. Okay. All right. Okay, now, whenever I'm factoring, I'm always looking to see, before anything else, if they have a common factor. And they do. They're all even, so they're all divisible by 2. They're not all divisible by 4. 14 is not divisible by 4, but they are all divisible by 2. So I can factor out a 2. Now, what am I going to get inside there? Well, what I'm going to be left with inside there is going to be 2x squared minus 7x, minus 4. And now my job is to factor what's inside the parentheses. So if I'm going to factor what's inside the parentheses, I need to find 2 numbers whose product is going to be 2 times negative 4. So whose product is negative 8. And at the same time, whose sum is what this middle number is. And we should be able to do that, negative 8 and positive 1. Negative 8 times 1 is negative 8. Negative 8 plus 1 is negative 7. So I'm going to rewrite this as 2x squared, and now instead of minus 7x, I'm going to write that as minus 8x plus 1x, which I'm just going to have plus x. And then I'm going to group these inside. So with that one, I can factor out a 2, and I'll be left with x squared minus, sorry, I can factor out a 2x, my bad. So with the numbers, I can factor out a 2, and with the letters, I can factor out an x. And I'll be left with x minus 4. And then with this pairing, there's nothing to factor out. It's plus x minus 4. So I'm just going to write that as 1 times x minus 4. And you can see that they have an x minus 4 in common. And then what's going to be left in here? Well, 2x and plus 1. So I could have, if I write it in this order, or I can have it written in that order. The order doesn't matter. Okay, so I know that I'm looking for one. So x plus 2, that's not in there. 2x minus 1 is not in there. Okay, that one's not in there. 2 times 2x plus 1 times x minus 4. This is going to be the one. Okay. All right. Let me see how much time. Okay, I got about 20 minutes left. That should be plenty of time. Okay, so I've just answered that one. Okay, use the quadratic formula to solve the equation. Okay. First of all, I always look to see if there's something common that I can divide through, because now I have an equation. And if you divide every term by it, you'll still have the same equation, but they don't have anything in common. All right, so my A is going to be equal to 2, the B is going to be equal to negative 3, and the C is going to be equal to negative 20. So the solutions will be minus B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4AC all over 2 times A. So I'm going to have minus B. B is negative 3 plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4 times A times C all over 2 times A. So the negative of negative 3 is 3. Negative 3 all squared is positive 9, not negative 9. If you wrote that without parentheses or put it in your calculator without parentheses, it's wrong, because only when it's in parentheses does the square apply to everything. And so you have to apply it to B, and B is negative 3. It has to be applied to everything. Now notice there's a negative sign here and there's a negative sign there. We got a product. They will cancel each other out. And 4 times 2 is 8, and 8 times 20 is 160. All right, now 9 plus 160 is 169, and the square root of 169 is equal to 13. So we're going to have 3 plus or minus 13 over 4 is our answer. And we'll have two answers, one if we use the plus sign, and one if we use the negative sign. So if I use the plus sign, I'll have 3 plus 13 over 4, which is 4. And if I use the negative sign, I'll have 3 minus 13, which is negative 10, all over 4. And that reduces to negative 5 halves. And you can put negative 10/4 in your calculator, press math button and enter, and it will give that for you. So I'm looking for 4 and negative 5 halves. Okay. All right, use the quadratic formula to solve this equation. So once again, They don't have anything in common. So A is 7, B is -2, C is equal to -9. So the answer is going to be -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times A times C all over 2 times A. So I'm going to have +2 plus or minus the square root of +4. And these two negative signs cancel. 4 times 7 is 28, and 28 times 9. Now, 252 plus 4 is 256, and the square root of 256 is 16. So I'm going to have 2 plus or minus 16 all over 14. One answer will be if I use the plus sign, and the other will be if I use the negative sign. So 2 plus 16 is 18/14, which will reduce to 9/7. And then 2 minus 16 is -14 over 14, which is -1. So +9/7 and -1. Okay. All right, let's see what we have here. Okay, now if I want to get that negative sign out, you just can't pull it out the front like these were parentheses. This is a square root symbol. So it becomes an I. Square root of 4 is 2. And now I can split this up. So I'm looking for 2 plus I. All right, here I'm going to have 2 plus 6i. Now the negative sign applies to every term. And minus -2i is plus 2i. 2 minus 8 is -6. And 6i plus 2i is 8i. So -6 plus 8i. Okay. All right, I'm going to have to FOIL. 3 times 5 is 15. 3 times -6i is minus 18i. 4i times 5 is 20i. And then for this one, 4i times -6i, do the numbers first. 4 times -6 is -24. And then you have I times I, which is I squared, which is -1. So -18i plus 20i is 2i. And I'm going to have 15 plus 2i, and -24 times -1 is +24. And so if I add 24 to that, I'm going to have 39 plus 2i. Okay. All right. All right, let's simplify. Okay, one way you can do this, you can FOIL that first, then multiply everything by 3i, or you can do this first and then FOIL. Okay, so if I do that, I'm going to have 3i times 1, and 3i times -15i, sorry, -5i. Well, 3 times -5 is -15, and I times I is I squared, which is -1. And then let's clean this up. I'm going to have 3i plus 15. And now FOIL. 3i times 7 is 21i, and 3i times 2i. 3 times 2 is 6, and I times I is -1. Okay, then 15 times 7 is 105. And 15 times 2i is plus 30i. So 15 minus 6, 105 minus 6 is going to be 99. And 21i plus 30i is 51i. All right. Okay, use the quadratic formula to solve. All right, A is going to be equal to 1, B is negative 2, and C is equal to 5. So I'm going to have minus B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4 times A times C, all over 2 times A. So I'm going to have 2 plus or minus positive 4 minus 20 over 2. 2 plus or minus the square root of negative 16, which is 2 plus or minus, well, that's going to give me 4i. And now I can split it up. So I'm going to have 1 plus or minus 2i. So 1 plus 2i and 1 minus 2i. And finally, for the last one, simplify I to the 27. Well, I can write 27 as 26 plus 1. And so that's the same thing as I to the 26 times I to the first, which is just I. 26 is 2 times 13. And that's going to be the same thing as I squared, all to the 13th power. Now, I squared, we know, is equal to negative 1. Now, a negative raised to an odd power, the negative symbol stays. And that will give me negative I. Okay, and that I think I've done everything.